When we were driving home, we saw all kinds of bizarre things that were totally out of place. Like right in the median strip, some businessman sitting on his briefcase with blood all over his pants and a tourniquet. A bunch of black guys surrounding some young couple who looked like tourists, literally ripping the woman's clothes off one piece at a time. A homeless guy by the edge of Sunset Boulevard holding a cardboard sign reading, "Repent now or be damned to hell." People running everywhere with shopping carts piled high with groceries or possessions. The smoke forced us to close the car ventilation intakes and circulate the air inside. We stopped at all the red lights until I realized that very few people were, and if we sat in place like this, we might get rear-ended. I was trying to keep my wife from losing it by staying in control myself, but I was having a really hard time convincing myself I was not dreaming. I kept thinking, this is one of those vivid dreams where something so incongruous will happen I will realize it is a dream, and suddenly things will be inconsistent and irrational, and then I will awaken. I thought there would be riots down in South Central like Watts. They might be bad, but there's no way that this could have happened to the entire city like this so quickly. That's what I was thinking. When we pulled into our driveway off Martin Way, it is like I was suddenly seeing with new eyes. Our home was right on Sunset Boulevard, close to an alley that accessed a main road on both sides. That was not a good place to be during the apocalypse. It's like my eyes had X-ray vision when we unlocked our front door. We were completely exposed in our one-level flat. Our door was made of a composite of cardboard fibers and lots of glue. Any man over 200 pounds could probably just tear the door right off the frame. It suddenly occurred to me I lived in a fishbowl with full-length windows in the front yard. Like most people, this had just not struck me as something important until right at that moment. I had been sleepwalking through my entire life. The first thing my wife did was rush over to the television and turn it on. I got my Desert Eagle out of the cupboard, and I immediately made a tour of the entire house, checking to see if all the windows and doors were locked. Then I came back to the living room and sat briefly with my wife watching the news, just as the last rays of the sun were dying behind the drapes. Night was coming. It looked like on television that nobody was going to be in darkness, though, because half the buildings in the city were catching fire. I was shaking. I could hear loud voices out in the street, some in fear, some in anger. I peered through the curtains and could only see dark shadows moving out on the sidewalk. I turned the porch light off. There was no way I wanted to go out there. I kept thinking, we'll keep the drapes closed and nobody will know we are here. I had this really powerful, overwhelming urge to want to rush to a strong door down to a cellar, which I would close behind us and have a rush of relief at finding a place with food, water, light, and safety. Unfortunately, there was no cellar. We lived in a styrofoam kit house that could likely be pulled apart by hand if somebody wanted to. Only a complete arsehole would live in a home like this. You'd have to be so tuned out you were barely registering as conscious. I took a look through the kitchen at my pathetic preps I had bought for those riots I was worried about. Some cans of soup, 2 jugs of spring water, a cheap little flashlight. I just had no idea. When I went out and sat in the living room and watched some more television, I got one consistent fact from the news. Apparently the police were nowhere to be found. 911 was not answering, and the government had completely abdicated its responsibility to keep order. The people on the news kept saying something about the police waiting for the National Guard to arrive. It took a really long time to sink in before I understood what they were saying. The police had camped out in their stations and were not coming out. You were completely on your own. My wife finally fell asleep on the couch around midnight. I did not sleep a wink and stayed in front of the television all night, making one cup of coffee after another and monitoring the creep of the riots towards us one block at a time from down in South Central. Every few minutes, a helicopter shot appeared of a new building burning at a ferocious rate, almost by magic, but just an hour beforehand it had been pristine. They never showed anyone running away from the building, no arsonists. It was just buildings exploding into bright flames, glowing like miniature suns one after the other in a slow procession towards Sunset Boulevard. You would have thought the planet had been invaded by aliens made of fire. Around 6 in the morning, I went out as the sun was rising. Half the horizon was a pillar of dark, billowing smoke that looked like a woodcutting from the Old Testament. It was 80 miles high and was reaching the upper atmosphere. If you want me to go on, I'll tell you the rest of what happened that day.